My name is Rachel Miller, 28 years old, and my hands were shaking as I pushed open the heavy courtroom doors. The stakes couldn't be higher. Custody of my 7-year-old daughter Madison hung in the balance. My parents, sitting rigidly in the back row, rolled their eyes when they saw me. Across the aisle, my ex-husband Jason sat smugly beside his expensive attorney, both in tailored suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I clutched my carefully organized folder, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. When Judge Simmons looked up and saw me representing myself, his eyebrows raised in surprise. Before I share what happened next, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength when the odds are stacked against you. Growing up as the only child of Harold and Evelyn Miller meant living under a microscope of impossibly high expectations. My father, a successful corporate attorney, and my mother, a perfectionist hospital administrator, had mapped out my entire life before I could even speak. A- grades were treated like failures. Second-place trophies were met with lectures about trying harder next time. Nothing I accomplished ever seemed quite good enough. Rachel, stand up straight. No one respects a woman with poor posture, my mother would snap whenever we were in public. Rachel, this essay is sloppy. Harvard doesn't accept mediocrity, my father would say, red pen hovering over my homework like a weapon. Their criticism was relentless, supposedly meant to push me toward excellence, but really only pushing me toward anxiety and self-doubt. By 18, I was desperate for escape, for someone who would love me without conditions attached to my performance. I met Jason Bennett during my freshman year of college. He was charming, confident, and seemed genuinely impressed by everything about me. Where my parents saw flaws, Jason saw qualities to admire. When he kissed me for the first time after our third date, I felt truly seen and accepted. His arms became my refuge from years of criticism. We married the summer after graduation, despite my parents' thinly veiled disapproval. Jason didn't come from the right kind of family, according to my father. My mother worried about his business degree from a state school rather than an Ivy League. I interpreted their concerns as more evidence of their impossible standards and pushed forward with the wedding. The first 2 years were everything I'd hoped for. Jason landed a job at a promising tech startup, and I worked in marketing for a local company. We bought a small starter home, adopted a rescue dog, and spent weekends hiking and dreaming about our future. When I became pregnant with Madison, Jason was overjoyed. He painted the nursery himself and read parenting books without prompting. Madison's birth seemed to mark a shift I didn't recognize until it was too late. Jason's startup began gaining traction, demanding longer hours. His salary increased dramatically as he moved up the corporate ladder. The more successful he became professionally, the more controlling he became at home. "You don't need to work. I make enough for both of us," he insisted when Madison was 18 months old. "That outfit isn't appropriate for a corporate dinner," he'd comment, sending me back to change before his work functions. "I've already told Madison she can't go to that birthday party," he'd announce, making parenting decisions without consulting me. The parallels to my childhood were there, but I refused to see them. Jason wasn't critical like my parents. He was protective, successful, building a good life for us. At least that's what I told myself as I gradually gave up friends, hobbies, and professional ambitions to keep peace in our home. Everything crumbled the day I found the text messages from Kimberly Wright, his attractive new marketing director. Their affair had been going on for months. When confronted, Jason didn't even try to deny it. "You've become boring, Rachel. All you talk about is Madison and household stuff." "Kimberly challenges me intellectually," he said coldly. 2 weeks later, he moved out and filed for divorce. I was blindsided. Suddenly, a single mother with a 5-year-old daughter, minimal recent work experience, and shattered self-confidence. Jason's attorney crafted an agreement heavily in his favor, which I signed in a daze of depression and fear. For a year, the arrangement technically worked. I got a small marketing job, found an affordable apartment, and tried rebuilding my life. Madison spent every other weekend and Wednesday evenings with Jason, who by then had moved Kimberly into his new luxury condo. Then came the bombshell. Jason filed for full custody, claiming my unstable living situation and limited income made me an unfit primary parent. His petition painted me as emotionally fragile, financially irresponsible, and unable to provide the advantages he could offer Madison. I called every attorney in town, but their retainer fees were impossible on my limited income. Jason knew exactly what he was doing. He had the resources to drag out legal proceedings until I was financially and emotionally drained. When I called my parents for help, their response cut deeper than Jason's betrayal. "We warned you about him from the beginning," my mother said. "But honestly, Rachel, maybe Madison would be better off with Jason. He can provide stability, good schools, opportunities." "You've never been particularly practical or responsible," my father added. "Perhaps this is for the best." Their words confirmed what Jason's actions suggested, that I wasn't enough, wasn't capable, wasn't worthy of fighting for my own daughter. That night, after tucking Madison into bed, I made a decision that would change everything. If no one would stand up for me, I would stand up for myself. I enrolled in night classes at the community college, focusing on basic legal principles. I spent every spare moment in the law library, reading about family court precedents and custody regulations. I studied procedural rules until my eyes blurred, taking meticulous notes between work shifts and after Madison's bedtime. When the custody hearing date arrived, I had no legal representation, no fancy degree, and no supporters in my corner. What I did have was determination, preparation, and the absolute certainty that no one loved Madison more than I did. That would have to be enough. The courtroom felt cavernous as proceedings began on that first morning. Judge Walter Simmons, a stern man in his 60s with reading glasses perched on the end of his nose, reviewed the case file with an inscrutable expression. The gallery behind me was sparsely populated. A few curious courthouse regulars, my disapproving parents, and Jason's supportive colleagues. The imbalance was palpable. Jason's attorney, Benjamin Hoffman, rose first. He was everything I wasn't in this setting, confident, polished, and completely at ease in his expensive suit. His opening statement painted Jason as the definition of stability and success. "Your Honor, my client provides a spacious home in an excellent school district, financial security, and consistent structure. Mr. Bennett is a respected business leader who can offer his daughter opportunities that Miss Miller simply cannot match with her limited resources and erratic employment history." Each word felt like a personal attack, but I forced myself to remain composed, scribbling notes as he spoke. When Hoffman called Jason's business partner as his first witness, the testimony was a glowing character reference that made Jason sound like Father of the Year. "Jason frequently mentions Madison in meetings. He adjusts his schedule whenever possible to attend her school events," the partner testified, conveniently omitting Jason's canceled visits and forgotten parent-teacher conferences. I fumbled through my first cross-examination, my voice quavering as I tried to challenge the one-sided portrayal. "Isn't it true that Mr. Bennett regularly cancels plans with Madison for work commitments?" I asked. "Objection, Your Honor. Assumes facts not in evidence," Hoffman interjected smoothly. "Sustained," Judge Simmons replied, giving me a look that suggested both impatience and pity. My stomach dropped as I returned to my table, aware I'd made a procedural error that undermined my credibility. The judge was already viewing me as an amateur disrupting his courtroom's normal functioning. But nothing prepared me for Hoffman's next witness, my own mother. Evelyn Miller took the stand with perfect posture and immaculate appearance, avoiding my gaze entirely. As she swore to tell the truth, a small voice in my head whispered that perhaps now she would acknowledge my dedication to Madison, my growth as a mother, my efforts to build a stable life despite difficult circumstances. That hope crumbled with her first responses. "Mrs. Miller, how would you characterize your daughter's sense of responsibility?" Hoffman asked. My mother sighed, as if reluctant to speak poorly of me, but bound by honesty. "Rachel has always been impulsive. Even as a child, she struggled with follow-through. Her father and I tried to instill discipline, but—" She trailed off with another dramatic sigh. "And your observations of her parenting?" "She loves Madison, of course," my mother conceded. "But love isn't always enough, is it? Children need structure, opportunities, stability. Jason provides those things. As she continued detailing my supposed lifelong pattern of irresponsibility, tears threatened. I blinked them back furiously. Showing emotion now would only reinforce their portrayal of me as unstable. When my turn for cross-examination came, my mind went blank. How do you cross-examine your own mother? How do you challenge the person who should be your strongest advocate, but has instead become your harshest critic? Mrs. Miller, I began, my voice strained. When was the last time you visited my apartment or observed my parenting firsthand? Objection, relevance, Hoffman called out. I'm establishing the witness's basis for her testimony about my current parenting, I responded, surprising myself with the clarity of my reasoning. I'll allow it, Judge Simmons said, his first ruling in my favor. My mother shifted uncomfortably. It's been several months. 8 months, to be exact, I corrected. So your testimony is based on impressions from my childhood and Jason's reports, not direct observation? I know my daughter, she replied stiffly. No further questions, I said, recognizing that pushing further would only antagonize the judge. As morning stretched into afternoon, Jason's case seemed increasingly solid. His witnesses were polished, his documentation extensive. Judge Simmons checked his watch repeatedly during my cross-examinations, his patience visibly thinning with my amateur legal tactics. When the judge called for a mid-afternoon recess, I fled to the courthouse bathroom, locking myself in a stall as the tears finally came. Through the door, I could hear 2 women at the sinks. That poor woman representing herself against Benjamin Hoffman, one said. He's going to destroy her. I heard the ex-husband is some tech executive. She doesn't stand a chance, the other replied, before their voices faded away. Slumped against the bathroom wall, I experienced the lowest moment of the day. They were right. I was outmatched, out-resourced, and increasingly out of hope. Perhaps my parents were right. Maybe Madison would be better off with Jason and his resources. As I washed my face, trying to erase the evidence of tears, an older woman in a courthouse staff badge entered. Patricia Johnson, according to her nameplate, gave me a small, kind smile as she washed her hands. First time representing yourself? She asked gently. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. Judge Simmons respects preparation and honesty above fancy law degrees, she said quietly. I've seen plenty of expensive attorneys lose in his courtroom when they underestimated someone who did their homework. With a final encouraging nod, she left. Her words weren't much, but they were the first supportive ones I'd heard all day. As I made my way back to the courtroom, I passed Jason and Hoffman in the hallway, heads together as they discussed what appeared to be celebration plans. After we wrap this up tomorrow, we should have dinner at Morton's, Jason was saying. Kimberly found a great preschool in Seattle for when we relocate next year. I froze, my blood turning to ice. Seattle? Jason was planning to move my daughter across the country? This detail hadn't been in any of his court filings. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just fighting for shared custody. I was fighting to keep Madison in the same state. Looking down at my folder of carefully prepared notes that suddenly seemed woefully inadequate, I made a decision. Tonight would require a complete overhaul of my strategy. The stakes were too high for anything less than my absolute best effort. The small one-bedroom apartment felt even more cramped than usual as I dropped my briefcase by the door. Madison was staying with a neighbor for the night, allowing me uninterrupted preparation time. But first, I needed to release the tidal wave of emotion threatening to drown me since hearing my mother's testimony. Collapsing onto my worn couch, I finally allowed myself to sob. For the betrayal, for the fear, for the crushing weight of facing this battle alone. 10 minutes of unrestrained tears left me spent but oddly clearer. My hands shook as I dialed Stephanie Adams, my college roommate and one of the few friends I'd managed to maintain despite Jason's gradual isolation tactics. How bad was it? She asked immediately. Worse than I imagined, I admitted, recounting the day's events, particularly my mother's devastating testimony. Maybe they're right. Maybe Madison would be better off with Jason's resources. Stop it right now, Stephanie's voice turned fierce. That's Jason and your parents talking. The Rachel I know is the most devoted mother I've ever seen. Madison needs you, not Jason's money or your parents' approval. Her certainty steadied me. But I'm so outmatched legally. So change the game, she interrupted. You've always been smarter than people give you credit for. Jason underestimates you. Use that. As our call ended, her words echoed. Jason did underestimate me. He always had. While appearing to support me during our marriage, he'd subtly reinforced my insecurities, positioning himself as the capable one, the successful one, the one making the important decisions. Energized by anger and determination, I spread my materials across the kitchen table, evaluating them with fresh eyes. My organization system needed complete restructuring. Rather than approaching this as a victim defending herself, I needed to become the prosecutor, highlighting Jason's unfitness as a primary custodian. I began by listing every canceled visit, every missed school event, every parenting responsibility Jason had delegated to me during our marriage. The pattern was clearer than I'd realized. A father who wanted the title without the day-to-day work of parenting. Around midnight, while reviewing our divorce financial disclosures, I noticed inconsistencies I'd previously overlooked. Jason's reported income didn't align with the lifestyle upgrades he'd made in the past year. Following this thread, I dug out bank statements I'd set aside, discovering regular transfers to an unlisted account. With growing excitement, I documented evidence suggesting Jason had hidden assets during our divorce proceedings, a serious issue in family court. My laptop screen glowed in the darkness as I researched precedents on the Public Law Library portal. One case particularly resonated. A mother who successfully argued against relocation by demonstrating the importance of stability and established community connections for the child's well-being. At 2 a.m., I remembered a conversation with Madison's teacher, Elizabeth Garcia, who had mentioned concern about Madison's anxiety during transition days to Jason's home. I immediately drafted an email requesting her professional observations, relieved when my phone rang just minutes later despite the hour. I've been worried about this situation, Elizabeth admitted. Madison becomes withdrawn the days Jason is scheduled to pick her up. She's mentioned several times that Daddy's always on his computer during their time together. Would you be willing to testify to that tomorrow? I asked, hardly daring to hope. I've already arranged for a substitute, she replied firmly. Just tell me what time. By morning, I had reorganized my entire case. I showered, then stood before the bathroom mirror, practicing questions and responses until my delivery sounded confident rather than desperate. I selected my most professional outfit, a navy blue dress I'd worn to marketing presentations in my previous job, paired with the single piece of good jewelry I'd kept after the divorce, pearl earrings from my grandmother. As I applied minimal makeup, I reminded myself of every time I'd successfully handled a challenge Jason thought beyond me. Solo parenting during his frequent business trips, managing household finances when he claimed I wasn't good with money, navigating Madison's early separation anxiety that he dismissed as coddling. I had been a capable, resourceful person before meeting Jason. Somewhere along the way, I'd allowed his perception of me to become my reality. No more. As dawn broke, I packed my restructured files, added Elizabeth Garcia's email confirmation, and placed a small photo of Madison in the front pocket of my portfolio, a reminder of exactly what I was fighting for. On my way out, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Don't embarrass yourself further today. Consider accepting Jason's offer of weekend visitation. Instead of crushing me as it would have yesterday, his message strengthened my resolve. I didn't respond, but silently promised both Madison and myself that today would be different. The judge had seen the Rachel that Jason and my parents expected. Uncertain, unprepared, easy to dismiss. Today he would meet the Rachel I was capable of being. When I walked into the courtroom on day 2, I moved differently. Shoulders back, chin up, steps measured and deliberate. I'd arrived 30 minutes early to set up my materials and center myself. Patricia, the court clerk from yesterday, gave me a subtle nod of approval at my more organized appearance. Jason arrived minutes before proceedings began, looking slightly less polished than yesterday. His confident smirk faltered momentarily when he saw my transformed demeanor, then returned with an added edge of dismissiveness. Judge Simmons entered, and after the customary rise and seating, he reviewed his notes from the previous day. "Miss Miller, you'll begin your case presentation this morning," he stated, peering over his reading glasses with what seemed like preemptive impatience. "Thank you, Your Honor," I replied, my voice steadier than I'd expected. "I'd like to start by calling Elizabeth Garcia, Madison's first-grade teacher." Elizabeth's testimony provided exactly the foundation I needed. She described Madison as a bright, well-adjusted child who showed signs of anxiety only around transitions to her father's care. She detailed my consistent involvement in school activities, regular communication with teachers, and attentiveness to Madison's educational needs. "And how often has Mr. Bennett attended parent-teacher conferences or school events this year?" I asked. "Mr. Bennett has attended one conference out of 3 scheduled, and none of the class performances or volunteer days," Elizabeth answered matter-of-factly. When Benjamin Hoffman cross-examined, attempting to suggest Elizabeth was biased in my favor as a friend, she calmly corrected him. "I know Miss Miller as Madison's mother, and as an active parent in our school community. Our relationship is strictly professional, focused on Madison's well-being." As Elizabeth stepped down, I noticed Judge Simmons making more extensive notes than he had during any of yesterday's testimonies. My next witness was Madison's pediatrician, Dr. Sarah Wilson, who confirmed that I had brought Madison to every scheduled appointment since birth, while Jason had attended only twice and had once canceled a follow-up appointment for an ear infection because it conflicted with a business meeting. "In your professional opinion," I asked, "how important is consistent routine and healthcare follow-through to a child's well-being?" "Absolutely essential," Dr. Wilson replied. "Children thrive with predictability, and when they see their health concerns taken seriously by caregivers." Hoffman's objection about relevance was overruled. My first procedural victory. Judge Simmons was listening with increased attention. The real turning point came when I introduced my documentation about Jason's financial discrepancies. "Your Honor, I'd like to submit evidence regarding previously undisclosed financial information relevant to this case," I said, approaching with copies of bank statements and transfer records. Hoffman immediately objected. "Your Honor, these documents weren't included in the pre-trial discovery. Because they were only discovered last night during my preparation," I countered, "and they directly contradict sworn financial statements Mr. Bennett submitted during our divorce proceedings last year." Judge Simmons reviewed the materials, his expression growing more serious. "I'll allow these documents. Mr. Hoffman, your client will have opportunity to address them during cross-examination." As I laid out the evidence of hidden accounts and undisclosed income, Jason's face darkened. The judge examined each document carefully, occasionally glancing at Jason with unmistakable disapproval. "Furthermore, Your Honor," I continued, gaining confidence, "I have reason to believe Mr. Bennett is planning to relocate to Seattle with our daughter if granted primary custody, a fact not disclosed in any of his petitions to this court." This revelation visibly startled the judge. "Is this true, Mr. Bennett?" he asked directly. Jason whispered urgently to Hoffman, who stood. "Your Honor, my client has been considering a promotion that might involve relocation, but no final decisions have been made. Yet this potential major change to Madison's living situation wasn't mentioned in any filings," I pointed out. "Madison has never lived anywhere but this community. Her school, friends, healthcare providers, and support systems are all here." Judge Simmons nodded thoughtfully, making another note before gesturing for me to continue. Throughout the morning, I methodically presented evidence of my stable parenting, consistent involvement in Madison's life, and plans for our future together. I introduced documentation of my night courses in business administration, showing my commitment to improving our financial situation without sacrificing time with Madison. By the lunch recess, the atmosphere in the courtroom had noticeably shifted. Judge Simmons, who had seemed dismissive yesterday, was now giving my presentation his full attention. Jason's relaxed posture had been replaced by tense whispers with his attorney. My parents, still seated in the back row, exchanged confused glances as their narrative of my incompetence unraveled before their eyes. When proceedings resumed, I took a calculated risk by calling Jason to testify. As he took the stand, I approached with calm I didn't entirely feel. "Mr. Bennett, can you name Madison's current teacher?" I began. He hesitated. "Miss Garcia, who just testified." "And her previous kindergarten teacher?" Another pause. "I believe it was Mrs. Johnson?" "It was Miss Williams," I corrected. "Can you tell the court what Madison's favorite bedtime story is currently?" "Objection, relevance," Hoffman interjected. "Your Honor, I'm establishing Mr. Bennett's familiarity with our daughter's daily life and preferences, which speaks directly to his ability to serve as primary custodian," I explained. "I'll allow it," Judge Simmons ruled. His interest visibly piqued. Jason shifted uncomfortably. "Madison likes many stories. But does she have a favorite she requests repeatedly?" "I don't recall a specific title," he admitted. Question by question, I exposed Jason's limited knowledge of Madison's daily life. Her favorite foods, her best friend's name, her weekend activities, her minor allergies. With each admission of ignorance, his frustration grew more apparent. When I presented Madison's weekly schedule, highlighting the numerous activities Jason had missed or canceled over the past 6 months, his composure finally cracked. "These are all minor details my assistant can track," he snapped. "I provide financial stability and opportunities Madison wouldn't have otherwise. That matters more than knowing what color crayon she prefers." His dismissive tone hung in the courtroom air. Judge Simmons's expression darkened as he made another note. "No further questions," I said quietly, knowing Jason's outburst had accomplished more than additional questioning could. During Hoffman's redirect, he attempted damage control, emphasizing Jason's professional accomplishments and financial resources. But the narrative had shifted. What had initially seemed like admirable ambition now appeared as detachment from his daughter's actual needs. As the day progressed, I introduced evidence of the consistent home environment I provided Madison, including testimonials from neighbors, after-school program supervisors, and Madison's piano teacher. Each witness reinforced the picture of a devoted mother who prioritized stability and emotional support. When Hoffman attempted to redirect focus to my limited income compared to Jason's affluence, I was prepared. "Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Madison's psychological evaluation from 3 months ago," I said, presenting the court with a report I'd initially hesitated to share. "The counselor specifically notes that Madison expresses security and happiness in our current living arrangement, despite our modest circumstances." By late afternoon, Judge Simmons called a 15-minute recess. As he left the courtroom, I saw him carrying my evidence binder along with his notes, a promising sign he was taking my case seriously. During the break, I overheard Jason speaking tensely to Hoffman in the hallway. "This isn't going as planned," he hissed. "Do something." "She was better prepared than anticipated," Hoffman replied quietly. "We may need to consider a different approach tomorrow." Their concerned exchange confirmed what I was beginning to feel. The momentum had shifted. For the first time since this battle began, I allowed myself to believe I might actually win. When court reconvened, Judge Simmons announced we would continue with final witnesses tomorrow, followed by closing arguments. As I packed my materials, I noticed Patricia giving me a subtle thumbs up from her clerk's station. Outside the courtroom, my parents waited awkwardly by the elevator. My mother stepped forward first. "You seem well prepared," she offered stiffly, the closest thing to approval I'd heard in years. "I am," I replied simply, neither seeking nor needing their validation anymore. As I walked to my car, exhausted but hopeful, I checked my phone to find a text from Stephanie. "Whatever happens, I'm proud of you for fighting. Madison is lucky to have you as her mother." Her words brought unexpected tears, not of sadness or fear this time, but of gratitude for the reminder that regardless of tomorrow's outcome, I had already won an important victory. I had found my voice again. The third day began with a tension in the courtroom that hadn't been there before. Jason and Benjamin Hoffman huddled in intense conversation right up until Judge Simmons entered. The shift in their demeanor was obvious. Yesterday's confidence had been replaced by a more aggressive strategy. I was scheduled to present my final witness when Hoffman stood. Your Honor, the respondent would like to call a rebuttal witness not previously listed, Michael Thompson, who worked with Miss Miller at Westside Marketing 2 years ago. My stomach dropped. Michael Thompson had been a difficult colleague who'd made uncomfortable advances that I'd rejected before leaving the company. I had no idea what he might say, but his unexpected appearance couldn't be good. Your Honor, I objected, this witness wasn't disclosed during discovery. Mr. Thompson only came forward yesterday evening with relevant information about Miss Miller's workplace behavior, Hoffman countered smoothly. We believe his testimony speaks directly to stability and judgment issues, Judge Simmons considered briefly. I'll allow the witness with the understanding that Miss Miller will have full opportunity to cross-examine. Proceed with caution, Mr. Hoffman. Michael Thompson took the stand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Under Hoffman's questioning, he painted a picture of me as emotionally volatile and professionally unreliable. Rachel would often arrive late, claiming childcare issues, he testified. She'd take personal calls during meetings and once broke down crying during a client presentation. Each accusation twisted events I remembered differently. The tardiness had been pre-approved adjustments to accommodate Madison's preschool schedule. The personal calls were from Madison's school nurse during a week of strep throat. The breakdown had been watery eyes during a presentation that fell 1 week after Jason had announced he was leaving. When my turn for cross-examination came, I took a deep breath and approached the witness stand. Mr. Thompson, when did you first speak with Mr. Bennett or his attorney about testifying today? I asked. Mr. Bennett called me yesterday afternoon, he replied. And before yesterday, when did you last speak with Mr. Bennett? Michael shifted uncomfortably. We occasionally grab drinks. How occasionally? I pressed. Maybe monthly for the past year or so. I nodded. So you've been in regular contact with my ex-husband throughout our separation and divorce, despite having no professional connection to him? We're friends, he defended weakly. Mr. Thompson, did you ask me out 3 times while we worked together? His face reddened. I might have suggested coffee once or twice. And after I declined these invitations, did your performance reviews of my work change dramatically? Objection, Hoffman interrupted. Relevance. I'm establishing the witness's potential bias, Your Honor, I explained. I'll allow it. The witness will answer, Judge Simmons ruled. Michael's testimony crumbled under continued questioning, especially when I produced copies of positive performance reviews that contradicted his characterization of my work. By the time he stepped down, his credibility was severely damaged, and Judge Simmons was viewing Jason with increased skepticism. Hoffman, recognizing the setback, quickly pivoted to their strongest remaining argument, calling Jason back to the stand to emphasize the financial advantages he could provide Madison. Mr. Bennett, please tell the court about the educational and extracurricular opportunities you can offer your daughter, Hoffman prompted. Jason leaned forward earnestly. I can provide Madison with private school education, summer enrichment programs, travel opportunities, the best health care, and a college fund already worth over $50,000. Rachel simply cannot match these resources on her limited income. When my turn for cross-examination came, I approached carefully. These advantages you've listed, private school, enrichment programs, travel, how much time have you spent researching which ones would best suit Madison's specific interests and needs? Jason hesitated. I have an educational consultant who can advise on those details. So you would outsource these decisions rather than make them yourself based on Madison's preferences? I clarified. I would provide the opportunities, he insisted, irritation creeping into his voice. I nodded and changed direction. During your testimony yesterday, you couldn't recall Madison's best friend's name. Has that changed overnight? Emma, he said confidently. Madison's best friend is Lily Zhang. They've been inseparable since preschool, I corrected gently. Emma moved away last year, which was very difficult for Madison. She cried about it for weeks. Jason's jaw tightened as Judge Simmons made another note. Mr. Bennett, in the past 6 months, how many of Madison's pediatrician appointments have you attended? I have a demanding job, he deflected. That wasn't my question. The number, please? None, he admitted reluctantly. But I've covered all the medical bills. And in those same 6 months, how many of your scheduled visitation days have you canceled or significantly shortened due to work commitments? His face darkened. A few. I presented the calendar I'd meticulously maintained. The record shows 7 canceled visits and 12 shortened by more than 3 hours. That's nearly half of your allotted parenting time, correct? Before he could answer, I shifted again. During your last weekend with Madison, what book did you read together? We watched a movie instead, he said defensively. What was the movie about? His hesitation was telling. It was an animated film. Madison enjoyed it. The title? I pressed. I don't recall exactly. My girlfriend picked it. The pattern of questions continued, each revealing Jason's limited engagement with Madison's daily life, despite his claims of superior parenting. His frustration mounted visibly with each exchange. Finally, I approached with copies of text messages I'd retrieved from my phone. Mr. Bennett, I'd like you to review these messages you sent me last month when I asked if you could take Madison for an extra day so I could attend a work training. Jason reviewed the printout, his expression hardening. You wrote, and I quote, "Not my scheduled day. Figure it out yourself. I'm not rearranging my life every time you have a problem. Is that correct?" That was a particularly busy week, he defended. Yet you're asking this court to believe you're prepared to rearrange your life entirely to be Madison's primary caregiver? That's different. I'd adjust my schedule accordingly, he insisted. Like you adjusted to attend her parent-teacher conferences? Or her dance recital last month? Or the doctor's appointment for her ear infection? His control finally snapped. This is ridiculous. I provide everything for that child financially. That matters more than attending every little school event or knowing trivial details about her daily life. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Simmons's eyebrows rose as Jason realized his outburst. No further questions, I said quietly. Hoffman attempted damage control during redirect, but Jason's frustration remained evident. When a question about potential relocation arose, his evasive answer clearly troubled the judge. During the mid-afternoon recess, Hoffman requested a private conference with the judge. My heart raced as they disappeared into chambers, leaving me alone in the courtroom wondering what strategy they were employing now. The 15-minute conference stretched to 30 anxious minutes before they returned. Judge Simmons's expression was stern as he resumed his seat. Based on information discussed in chambers, I'm requiring Mr. Bennett to produce complete financial records regarding the previously undisclosed accounts by tomorrow morning, he announced. This court takes financial transparency very seriously. Hoffman's tight expression confirmed what I suspected. Their private discussion hadn't gone in Jason's favor. Whatever they'd attempted to negotiate in chambers had backfired, drawing more scrutiny to Jason's financial maneuvering. As testimony concluded for the day, I felt cautiously optimistic. The narrative had shifted dramatically from where we'd begun 2 days ago. Judge Simmons was now viewing Jason's case with healthy skepticism, while my presentation had grown more confident and compelling each day. Tomorrow would bring closing arguments and potentially a ruling. As I packed my materials, I caught sight of my parents in the gallery, their expressions unreadable, but notably lacking the dismissiveness of the first day. Whether they were reconsidering their position or simply surprised by my performance remained to be seen. Regardless, I left the courthouse with my head high, no longer feeling like the underdog in this fight. For perhaps the first time since the custody battle began, I believed the truth might actually prevail. The final day of the hearing dawned with a sense of culmination hanging in the air. The courthouse seemed quieter than previous days, as if the building itself recognized the weight of what was about to unfold. I arrived early, my closing argument rehearsed but adaptable depending on any last-minute developments. Judge Simmons entered looking particularly serious, acknowledging the court before addressing Jason's attorney directly. "Mr. Hoffman, has your client produced the financial documentation as ordered?" Hoffman rose. "Yes, Your Honor. The records were submitted to the court this morning." "Very well." The judge reviewed the documents briefly, his expression growing more stern as he read. "These will be entered into evidence. We'll proceed with closing arguments. Miss Miller, as the respondent in this action, You may begin." I stood, surprised at the steadiness in my legs after days of anxiety. The notes I'd prepared suddenly seemed inadequate to capture what this case was truly about. Setting them aside, I decided to speak from the heart while keeping the key legal points front of mind. Your Honor, this case isn't fundamentally about financial resources, though Mr. Bennett has repeatedly emphasized his superior economic position. This case is about what truly matters for a 7-year-old child's well-being: consistent presence, emotional stability, and genuine engagement with her daily life. I methodically reviewed the evidence presented. Jason's limited knowledge of Madison's life, his numerous canceled visits, his delegation of parenting responsibilities to others, and his apparent plans to relocate Madison away from her established support network. The court has heard testimony establishing that I have been Madison's primary caregiver since birth, while Mr. Bennett focuses on what he could theoretically provide. Madison, I've demonstrated what I actually do provide her every day: homework help, emotional support, consistency, and deep knowledge of her needs and personality. I address the financial disparity directly. Yes, my resources are more limited than Mr. Bennett's, but Madison has health insurance through my employer, a safe home, nutritious meals, and all necessary resources for her development. What she doesn't have when she's with me is a parent distracted by constant work calls or who delegates her care to a girlfriend or assistant. As I concluded, I emphasized Madison's need for stability. Your Honor, Madison deserves to maintain her connection with both parents. I've never sought to limit Mr. Bennett's role in her life. I've simply asked the court to maintain the arrangement that has allowed Madison to thrive: primary physical custody with me and generous visitation with her father. That arrangement honors both parents' roles while prioritizing what Madison needs most: continuity, stability, and genuine parental engagement. Taking my seat, I noticed Judge Simmons nodding slightly, though his overall expression remained inscrutable. Benjamin Hoffman's closing argument reiterated Jason's financial advantages and attempted to characterize me as resistant to co-parenting, but his earlier confidence had noticeably diminished. The evidence simply didn't support many of his assertions, and he seemed aware of it. As Hoffman concluded, Judge Simmons leaned forward. "Before I consider this matter, is there anything else either party wishes to address?" To my surprise, my father stood from the gallery. "Your Honor, if the court permits, Harold Miller would like to make a brief statement." My heart hammered as Judge Simmons considered the unusual request. This is irregular, but given the nature of family court and Mrs. Miller's previous testimony, I'll allow a brief statement. My father approached the front of the courtroom. His normally confident posture somehow diminished. I braced myself for additional criticism, another betrayal to endure before this ordeal ended. "Your Honor, I'm Rachel's father," he began, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "My wife and I testified earlier in these proceedings, and he paused, clearing his throat. "I need to amend that testimony." A murmur ran through the courtroom as my mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. When Jason first came to us with concerns about Rachel's parenting, we accepted his characterization without question. "We've always had high expectations for our daughter, and we've been," he hesitated again, "overly critical when we felt she didn't meet those expectations." I stared in disbelief as my father continued. "Watching these proceedings has been enlightening. The Rachel who has stood in this courtroom advocating for her daughter is not the person Jason described to us, nor is she the person we've sometimes convinced ourselves she was. She has demonstrated intelligence, preparation, and most importantly, a deep understanding of what her daughter needs." He turned slightly toward me, though his gaze remained fixed somewhere over my shoulder. "We were wrong to doubt her capabilities as a mother. We were wrong to side with Jason without investigating his claims. And we were wrong," his voice cracked slightly, "to have made her feel that she was never quite good enough." The courtroom fell silent as he turned back to the judge. "I believe my daughter is an excellent mother who has always put Madison's needs first. Whatever custody arrangement you determine, both my wife and I are committed to supporting Rachel and our granddaughter going forward." As he returned to his seat, I blinked back tears, too stunned to process the unexpected support from the quarter I'd least expected it. The silence was broken by Jason, suddenly rising from his chair. "This is ridiculous!" he exclaimed, ignoring his attorney's attempt to restrain him. "They're all turning against me now? After everything I've provided?" Judge Simmons's gaze hardened. "Mr. Bennett, sit down. You're not recognized to speak." "Your Honor, you need to understand what's really happening here," Jason continued, shrugging off Hoffman's restraining hand. "Rachel has manipulated this entire situation. She's trying to punish me for moving on with my life. Mr. Bennett, I'm warning you. I'm the one who can give Madison advantages. Rachel never could. I'm the one who's built a successful career while she's been stuck in mediocrity. I've offered to pay for everything Madison needs." "Your client is in contempt, Mr. Hoffman," Judge Simmons warned. As Hoffman attempted to control the situation, I reached into my folder and retrieved a small digital recorder. With shaking hands, I stood. "Your Honor, I have one final piece of evidence I'd like to submit." Judge Simmons looked at me skeptically. "Miss Miller, all evidence should have been presented during the evidentiary phase." "I understand, Your Honor, but Mr. Bennett's outburst makes this particularly relevant. It's a recording of a conversation we had 3 months ago, when I first questioned his intentions regarding custody." Hoffman immediately objected, but Jason's continued muttering undermined his attorney's efforts. "Given the circumstances, I'll allow it," Judge Simmons ruled, his patience with Jason visibly wearing thin. The court fell silent as I played the recording. Jason's voice, cold and calculated, filled the courtroom. "You might as well give up now, Rachel. I have the money to drag this out until you're bankrupt. No judge is going to choose your pathetic apartment and budget daycare over what I can provide. You know I always win. That's what successful people do. We get what we want." When my recorded voice asked, "Is this about punishing me for the divorce?" his response was chilling. "This is about getting what I deserve. Madison is a Bennett. She belongs with me, living the life I've earned. I'll use every dollar I have to destroy you if that's what it takes." As the recording ended, the courtroom remained silent. Jason's face had drained of color. Hoffman sat with his head in his hands, his case effectively destroyed by his own client. Judge Simmons removed his glasses, pinching the bridge of his nose before addressing the court. "We'll take a 30-minute recess while I consider my ruling." The half hour that followed was the longest of my life. I sat alone at my table, neither wanting nor seeking comfort from anyone around me. This moment of limbo felt sacred somehow, the last minutes before knowing whether my fight had been enough. Patricia, the clerk, caught my eye from her station and gave a small, encouraging nod. It wasn't resolution, but it was something to hold on to as the minutes ticked by. When Judge Simmons returned, his expression was resolute. The customary all-rise was followed by a tension so thick it seemed to have physical weight. Having considered all testimony and evidence presented in this matter, he began, "I am prepared to issue my ruling regarding custody of Madison Bennett." I held my breath as he continued. "This court has observed a concerning pattern in Mr. Bennett's approach to parenting, one that prioritizes financial provision while demonstrating minimal engagement with the day-to-day realities of raising a child." He turned his attention to me. "Conversely, Miss Miller has shown herself to be deeply knowledgeable about her daughter's needs, consistently present, and committed to providing stability despite limited resources." Looking back at Jason, whose face had hardened into a mask, the judge continued, "Mr. Bennett's undisclosed financial dealings during divorce proceedings, apparent plans to relocate the child without court approval, and behavior in this courtroom all raise serious concerns about judgment and transparency." Judge Simmons straightened the papers before him. "Therefore, I am awarding primary physical custody to Rachel Miller, with Jason Bennett to have visitation every other weekend and 1 evening per week to be exercised within the current county of residence." I closed my eyes briefly as relief flooded through me. "Additionally," the judge continued, "Mr. Bennett will attend co-parenting classes and anger management counseling before any modification to this arrangement will be considered. Child support will be recalculated based on the financial disclosures now properly before this court." He addressed Jason directly. "Mr. Bennett, This court takes a dim view of hidden assets and threatening behavior. Consider yourself fortunate that I'm not referring this matter for further investigation." With a final rap of his gavel, Judge Simmons concluded, "This court is adjourned." The finality of the moment washed over me in waves. Disbelief, then relief, then quiet joy. I had done it. Against overwhelming odds. Without resources or connections or anyone believing in me, I had fought for my daughter and won. As the courtroom began to clear, Jason pushed past his attorney and paused at my table, his voice low and dangerous. "This isn't over. I'll appeal." Before I could respond, a calm voice interrupted. "I wouldn't recommend that approach, Mr. Bennett." We both turned to find Judge Simmons still at the bench, paperwork in hand, but clearly having overheard. Appeals in family court rarely succeed without significant procedural errors, which did not occur here. The judge continued matter-of-factly. "Further litigation would only deplete resources better directed toward your daughter's well-being and the counseling this court has ordered." Jason stalked away without another word, leaving his attorney to gather their materials. As I collected my own papers, my parents approached hesitantly. My mother spoke first, her usual confidence absent. "We'd like to take you to dinner," she said, "if you're willing, to talk about moving forward." The old Rachel would have eagerly accepted this olive branch, desperate for their approval. The new Rachel considered it carefully. "I'd like that," I replied honestly, "but I need to call Madison first, and I want to start slowly. There's a lot to process." They nodded, accepting these terms with an uncharacteristic humility that suggested their courthouse revelation might be genuine. As they walked ahead toward the exit, Patricia approached my table. "Congratulations," she said warmly. "I've been a clerk for 20 years, and I've rarely seen someone represent themselves so effectively." "Thank you for your encouragement," I replied sincerely. "It meant more than you know." She smiled. "Actually, I'm in my second year of night law school myself. Watching you these past few days has been inspiring." As I gathered the last of my materials, I realized that beyond winning custody, I had reclaimed something I'd lost long ago: the belief in my own capabilities. Whatever came next, I would face it knowing I was stronger than anyone, including myself, had believed. The courthouse steps felt different beneath my feet as I emerged into the afternoon sunlight. The weight that had pressed on my chest for months had lifted, replaced by a lightness that was almost disorienting. Madison was staying with me. The life we'd built together would continue. My phone vibrated with a text from Stephanie. "Verdict," I called rather than texted, wanting to share this moment with a voice rather than words on a screen. "I won," I said when she answered, the reality sinking in deeper as I spoke the words. "Primary physical custody, with Jason getting every other weekend." Stephanie's whoop of celebration was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "IKNEW, you could do it. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I say Jason underestimated you?" Her joy was infectious, and I found myself laughing, actually laughing, for what felt like the first time in years. The judge ordered him to take parenting classes and anger management too. "Oh, that must have gone over well with Mr. Perfect," Stephanie remarked. "About as well as you'd expect," I confirmed, describing Jason's furious exit and Judge Simmons's shutdown of his appeal threat. As we talked, I watched my parents waiting patiently by their car across the parking lot. Their posture was different, less rigid, more uncertain. They looked older suddenly, or perhaps I was just seeing them clearly for the first time in years. "My parents want to take me to dinner," I told Stephanie. They apologized. In court. It was surreal. "Wow." Stephanie sounded as shocked as I felt. "Are you going to go?" "Yes," I decided. "But I'm calling Madison first, and I'm going to take things slowly with them. There's a lot of history to work through." "That's my girl," Stephanie said approvingly. "Setting healthy boundaries even in victory. I'm so proud of you, Rach." After we hung up, I made the call I'd been waiting for. Madison's excited voice filled me with a joy nothing else could match. "Does this mean I'm staying with you, Mommy?" she asked, after I explained the judge's decision in 7-year-old appropriate terms. "Yes, sweetheart. You'll still see Daddy regularly, But our home will stay your main home. Good, she said simply. Lily and I are working on a secret fort in the closet. I didn't want to have to move it. Her innocent prioritization of childhood concerns over adult complications brought fresh tears to my eyes. The fort can stay right where it is. I'll see you tonight, okay? I love you. Love you too, Mommy. As I approached my parents' car, I noticed my mother wringing her hands, a nervous gesture I'd never associated with her usual composed demeanor. Rachel, my father began awkwardly. What I said in court, let's talk about it over dinner, I interrupted gently. I'd prefer not to have this conversation in a parking lot. He nodded, accepting this boundary without the dismissiveness that would have been typical before. We drove to a nearby restaurant in uncomfortable silence, the decades of complicated history between us filling the car more effectively than conversation could have. At the restaurant, after ordering, my mother finally spoke. Jason came to us 6 months ago, very concerned about your emotional stability after the divorce. He painted a picture that aligned with. She hesitated. With our existing worries about you. We believed him without questioning. You've always believed the worst about me, I said quietly. For as long as I can remember, my father winced. We wanted you to excel, to have every advantage we could provide. No, I corrected, the clarity of recent days still with me. You wanted me to never disappoint you. Those aren't the same thing. A painful silence followed until my mother reached across the table, stopping just short of touching my hand. Can we start again? With Madison especially? We've missed so much already. I considered their request carefully. The old Rachel would have immediately agreed, desperate for their approval. The new Rachel recognized both the opportunity and the risk. I'd like Madison to know her grandparents, I said finally. But my relationship with you needs to change. No more criticism disguised as concern. No more impossible standards. If you want to be part of our lives, you need to accept both of us as we are, not as you wish we were. My father nodded solemnly. We can try. That's all I can promise, that we'll try to do better. It wasn't a Hallmark movie reconciliation, but it was honest. A beginning rather than an ending. As dinner concluded, my phone rang with an unfamiliar courthouse number. It was Patricia, the clerk. Sorry to bother you after hours, she began, but Judge Simmons asked me to pass along some information. There's a scholarship program through the State Bar Association for parents who've represented themselves effectively in family court. It covers partial tuition for law school. The deadline's next month, and he thought you might be interested. I thanked her, stunned by this unexpected development. Law school had never been on my radar, had seemed as inaccessible as the moon, but the events of the past few days had shifted something fundamental in how I viewed my capabilities. When I hung up, my parents were watching me curiously. The court clerk, I explained. Apparently there's a scholarship program for law school that Judge Simmons thought I should consider. Law school? My mother's surprise was evident. I waited for the dismissive follow-up, the subtle undermining that had characterized her reactions to my ambitions throughout my life. Instead, she nodded thoughtfully. You were remarkably effective in that courtroom. It seemed natural for you. It wasn't quite encouragement, but it wasn't discouragement either. For now, that was enough. As we parted ways outside the restaurant, my father attempted an awkward hug that I returned briefly before stepping back. Small steps, I reminded them. We'll figure this out gradually. Driving home alone, I felt the first real peace I'd experienced in months. The custody battle was over. Madison was safe. And somewhere along the way, in fighting for my daughter, I'd rediscovered the woman I was meant to be. Resilient, capable, and far stronger than anyone had given me credit for. As I pulled into my apartment complex, I spotted Mrs. Rodriguez from next door watching for me. She had been keeping Madison during the hearing days and had become a surrogate grandmother figure during the past difficult year. Well, she called as I approached, her kind face anxious with anticipation. We won, I said simply. Her weathered hands clasped mine. I knew you would, Carita. That child belongs with her mother. And you, she added with surprising insight, needed to remember your strength. Inside my apartment, I set down my briefcase for the last time, surveying the modest space that had been the subject of so much courtroom discussion. Jason and his attorney had repeatedly characterized it as inadequate compared to his luxury condo. Yet this small apartment held Madison's artwork on the refrigerator, her favorite stuffed animals arranged on her bed, the growth chart marked in pencil on the kitchen doorframe. It held the lives we had built together, the security of consistent love and presence. No amount of square footage or premium appliances could replace that. As I prepared for Madison's return from Mrs. Rodriguez's apartment, I realized that this victory wasn't just about custody. It was about reclaiming my voice, my self-belief, and my power to shape our future, regardless of what anyone else thought possible. 6 months after the custody hearing, Madison and I moved into a slightly larger apartment with an extra bedroom and a small balcony where we started a container garden together. It wasn't the luxury condo Jason provided during his weekends, but Madison had decorated her new room with solar system decals on the ceiling and a special reading nook by the window. She called it her thinking corner and spent hours there with books and her journal. "Mom, can you help me with this science project?" Madison called from the kitchen table one Tuesday evening. "We're making models of different habitats." I smiled as I joined her, remembering how she used to ask Jason for help with homework during their marriage. His typical response had been to hire a tutor rather than spend the time himself. These ordinary moments of engagement, helping with schoolwork, discussing her day, just being present, were the real victory of the custody battle. My enrollment in part-time law school had surprised everyone, including myself. The scholarship Judge Simmons had recommended covered enough tuition to make it feasible alongside my marketing job, which had evolved into a more flexible remote position. Habitat models were my favorite in 3rd grade, I told Madison, examining her sketch. "What ecosystem did you choose?" "Wetlands," she announced proudly. "Miss Garcia says they're super important but often forgotten, kind of like how people forget about little creatures that matter." I nodded, thinking how perceptive children could be. That's very true. Sometimes the most important things aren't the flashiest or most obvious. Our co-parenting relationship with Jason had improved gradually as he completed the court-ordered classes. The anger management sessions particularly seemed to help him process the divorce and custody outcome in healthier ways. While we would never be friends, we had established a workable communication system focused solely on Madison's needs. "Your dad mentioned he might take you to the Science Museum this weekend," I reminded her. "Maybe you could get some ideas for your project there." Madison nodded while carefully coloring her diagram. "Yeah, he's been better about doing actual stuff together instead of just buying things. Last time we went hiking and identified birds." The shift in Jason's parenting approach had been one of the more unexpected outcomes of the court case. Whether motivated by genuine growth or simply wanting to prove the judge wrong, he had begun engaging more meaningfully during his visitation time. My relationship with my parents had evolved as well, though more slowly and with careful boundaries. They joined us for dinner every other Sunday, making genuine efforts to know Madison as an individual rather than a projection of their expectations. "Your grandmother asked if you'd like to come over tomorrow after school to bake cookies," I mentioned casually. Madison considered this thoughtfully. "Can we use my recipe this time? Last time she kept saying hers was better." I smiled at her gentle boundary setting, something I was still learning myself. "I'll make sure she knows it's your special recipe day." "Okay then," Madison agreed. "She's trying, right, Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart. We're all trying." My mother had recently started attending therapy, something that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "I want to understand why I've been so critical," she had admitted during a rare, vulnerable moment. "I don't want Madison to ever feel the way I made you feel." The doorbell rang, interrupting our project work. Stephanie stood outside with takeout bags and a bottle of wine. "Study session/dinner/grown-up talk time," she announced, entering with her usual energy. "Hi, Maddie girl. I brought your favorite spring rolls." Madison cheered, temporarily abandoning her wetlands project for the promise of Thai food. Stephanie had become an even more integral part of our lives since the hearing. As I navigated the challenges of work, school, and parenting, her support remained unwavering. "How's the Thompson case going?" I asked as we set up dinner. During my legal studies, I had begun helping with research for Stephanie's nonprofit organization, which provided advocacy for domestic violence survivors. "We're making progress. The restraining order was extended, and the housing assistance came through." She lowered her voice. "Actually, she asked specifically if you could help with her custody preparation. Your reputation is spreading." I felt a mixture of pride and humility. My custody experience had unexpectedly connected me with other women facing similar battles. Initially, I had simply shared my courtroom notes and preparation strategies, but it had evolved into a small, informal network of mutual support. "I'd be happy to help her," I agreed. "Maybe Sunday afternoon while Madison is with my parents?" After dinner and Madison's bedtime routine, Stephanie and I spread our respective work across the kitchen table, her advocacy paperwork and my constitutional law assignments. "Have you seen the email from Patricia?" Stephanie asked, scrolling through her phone. Patricia Johnson, the courthouse clerk who had encouraged me during the hearing, had completed her law degree and started a small family law practice. We had kept in touch, and she occasionally sent referrals my way for research assistance. "Not yet," I replied, checking my own messages. "Oh, the clerkship opportunity. That would be perfect for next summer." "You should absolutely apply," Stephanie encouraged. "Judge Simmons specifically mentioned your name." The same judge who had presided over my custody case had apparently remembered me when a summer position opened in family court. It wasn't a high-paying opportunity, but the experience and connections would be invaluable. "I never imagined any of this a year ago," I admitted. "I was just trying to keep Madison with me." "Sometimes the hardest fights lead us exactly where we're meant to be," Stephanie replied. The following weekend, I received an unexpected text from Jason asking to speak after he dropped Madison home. Our exchanges were typically brief and child-focused, so this unusual request made me slightly apprehensive. "I've accepted a promotion," he said without preamble, when Madison was occupied in her room. "It would mean relocating to Seattle." My heart rate immediately accelerated, old fears resurfacing. "Jason, I'm not fighting the custody arrangement," he interrupted, seeming to understand my concern. "I've decided to turn down the relocation component and negotiate a remote work arrangement for the Seattle project." I stared at him, genuinely surprised. "You're staying because of Madison?" He nodded, a flicker of the man I'd once married briefly visible. The parenting classes were educational. I realized Madison needs consistency. And yes, I could fight for her to move with me, hire the best attorneys, make all the same arguments about superior opportunities and resources. "But," I prompted when he hesitated. "But she's happy here," he admitted quietly. "She has friends, activities, routines. And she has you." He shrugged, visibly uncomfortable with the vulnerability. "You're a good mother, Rachel. Better than I acknowledged." The acknowledgement, so long sought and never expected, left me momentarily speechless. "Thank you for telling me," I finally managed, "and for prioritizing her stability." After he left, I sat on the balcony with my law textbook open but unread, reflecting on the journey of the past year. The custody battle that had once seemed like the end of my world had instead become a beginning of self-discovery, of new professional possibilities, of healthier relationships. The following week brought an unexpected letter from a woman I didn't recognize. The return address was from a neighboring county, and the handwriting was elegant and precise. "Dear Miss Miller," it began, "you won't remember me, but I was in the courthouse during your custody hearing 6 months ago. I was waiting for my own case to be called and observed much of your self-representation." She continued, explaining that she had been contemplating surrendering in her own custody dispute due to limited resources and overwhelming odds. "Watching your courage and preparation inspired me to continue fighting. I represented myself using many of your techniques and received joint custody last month. Thank you for showing me it was possible." Tears blurred my vision as I finished reading. The idea that my struggle had unknowingly helped someone else find their strength was profoundly moving. When Madison came home from school that afternoon, she found me still contemplating the letter. "Are you sad, Mom?" she asked, climbing into my lap despite being almost too big for it now. "No, sweetheart. Someone wrote to tell me I helped them when they were having a hard time, even though I didn't know it." Madison considered this with the simple wisdom of childhood. "That's like when you help people who are scared of court stuff now. You know how to be brave because you were scared too." Her insight caught me off guard. "When did you get so smart?" I asked, hugging her close. "I've always been smart," she replied, matter-of-factly. "You just make sure I know it's okay to show it." That evening, as I prepared for a study group meeting, I received a call from Patricia about another mother needing guidance with self-representation. As had become my practice, I agreed to meet her, to share what I'd learned, to help her find her own voice in the courtroom. The journey from that first terrifying day in court to where I stood now felt circular somehow, from needing help no one would provide to becoming the help others needed. The painful experience had transformed into purpose. Later that week, the acceptance letter for the judicial clerkship arrived, along with an unexpected personal note from Judge Simmons. "Your advocacy for your daughter revealed a natural legal mind. I look forward to seeing where this path takes you." Standing on our small balcony that evening, watching Madison tend to her container plants with focused determination, I reflected on the most valuable lesson of the past year. Sometimes, the people who don't believe in you are the ones who ultimately push you to discover just how capable you truly are. The judge's surprise at my courtroom performance had been gratifying, but the real victory was my own realization that I had always been stronger than anyone, including myself, had believed. That knowledge couldn't be taken away, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Hey everyone, thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. I'd love to hear about a time when you surprised yourself by finding strength you didn't know you had. Drop a comment below sharing your experience, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe to hear more stories of unexpected courage and resilience. Remember, sometimes the moments that seem designed to break us are actually the ones that reveal our true strength. Until next time, believe in yourself even when, especially when no one else does.